Hi everyone on Zoom, thank you for coming. My name's Julian Lee and I'm the Sustainability Education Officer here at Bramah Council. Bramah Council is a really proud partner of Grow It Local, who run fantastic free digital workshops with amazing gardeners every fortnight. Highly recommend that you sign up at growitlocal.com. This week, in the first of a 10-week series on what is a food forest, we're looking at what is a food forest. So Steve Batley's going to take my spot here in a second. And I've got next to me Jude, who is doing the course here face-to-face. We'll be answering a couple of questions from Steve. At the end, we'd love to take some questions. We've only got 15 minutes. We'll get through as many as we can. But you can send them to me via chat and I'll try and get to as many through Steve as possible. Thank you.
Cool. All right, so we've also got, you can probably see a whole bunch of really smart people who know exactly what a food forest is behind us. So I'm sure they're more than eager to call out as well with some input. So I'm Steve, and I've got about 5 minutes to kind of give you a broad idea of what a food forest is, and then Jude's going to share some of her ideas as well. So look, when you think of a food forest, I imagine a forest. You know, we've all been to a forest. We know, most of us know what a forest looks like, what a forest feels like, how a forest is structured. Imagine a forest could be a rainforest, it could be somewhere in the national park, it could be an eco system right here at Randwick, it could be on the headland at Bronte or Malabar or whatever, and they're all different. They're all, you go to the forest at Malabar and it's kind of, the plants are about this big because they're getting smashed by the wind all the time. You step away from the coast a bit more, it's less windy, a bit more sheltered, you get taller trees and you get a different structure altogether. But they're all forests. They're all sort of have similar things that are going on. So if you imagine you're in your forest, people have been managing forests in this area for thousands and thousands of years. It's only the last couple of hundred years that we've lost that contact with our surroundings, and people have always lived with the forest and use the forest to get everything that they need. So food, shelter, fuel, and all those sorts of things. And all that we're doing with a permaculture food forest is basically the same thing. It's creating an ecosystem that provides humans with everything that we need. The difference is that we're designing our forest from scratch, or maybe we're working with what we've got already, but then incorporating food and other useful plants. So I don't know if we'll ever have that same relationship with the land as people have for thousands of years in this country, but hopefully we get some sort of sense of being part of that ecosystem as well. And we can create these forests by using permaculture. It's one of the tools that we can use. And permaculture has a whole bunch of principles that we can apply to when we're designing and when we're managing the food forest. And last week, the guys here did an exercise where the principle they were using was observe and interact. So I might pass over to Jude at this point and just ask, what did you do that used this principle of observe and interact last week?
So last week we went out into the outside, which was exciting. We went out of the classroom and we walked around outside and we spent a bit of time just watching, which was great, and trying to think about what we were looking at, and what were the elements of what we were looking at. And we went to two different spaces and they were quite different. So it was interesting to be able to observe two different landscapes quite close to each other. And we talked about what we'd seen and the different ways that the plants were living in that particular part of the landscape and what people had done to contribute, I suppose, to that landscape.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the first place you looked at?
The first place was more trees and bushes. and a bit more native, I would say.
Yeah. So that was in next door in the eastern suburbs, Banksia scrub forest, the sort of remnant ecosystem.
Yes, exactly that.
And what did you notice? There was trees and shrubs, and
It was fairly dense. You could see that there weren't many weeds. The soil was really quite sandy, but there's still a thriving ecosystem, which was really interesting on what looks like really infertile soil. But we spotted lots of things, and we noticed that the leaves were quite small, so to avoid evaporation and things like that. So the plants had adapted to that environment really well because they were thriving.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And what was the second place you looked at?
That was more of a I would describe that as a permaculture garden. So that was a really varied number of plants, most of which were edible, but there were also some other plants that were in there that were doing different things for that area. So maybe nitrogen fixers or things that were going to enrich the soil.
Mm.
But we found out that nothing went in apart from plants. So no fertilizer, nothing like that. Just all this variety that was making the soil so lush. So it was quite different soil.
Mm.
Mm.
Very important observation, that one, the soil. Really cool. So what was similar about the two ecosystems?
I think what was similar for me was that they were both really healthy. They were both really verdant. They were full of life. They were both had quite a bit of variety going on, but I think the second one had a bit more variety. I think that was by design. But both of them didn't have particular problem with weeds or pests or disease. Couldn't see disease, so they were really healthy.
Yeah.
And lots of other than humans around, insects just doing their things, stuff like that. Yeah,
Cool. And you probably covered already, but the differences, the key difference between the two, do you think?
For me was probably the amount of input from humans in a way.
Yeah.
So one was more designed, sort of more controlled. The other one seemed less so, but that might just be an illusion. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was less designed, definitely. Yeah, cool. And I guess the other key, probably another key difference is that the second one, the permaculture one, the mix of plants is quite different. You mentioned that, but certainly more focused around food producing plants. Well, as we know them, yes.
Yeah,
cool. Thanks, Jude. All right, Q&A time. We got any questions from the Zoomers?
Guys, now's the time to either yell out or type a question about, what's your burning question about what is a food forest?
And we'll just sit here quietly. Any questions from the audience? You guys? Comments?
Here we go. Zena, would you like to actually say it out loud, because there isn't a waterfall of questions, so.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Zena.
Hi, Zena.
Hi, thank you. This is great. Bit of a lunch and learn. So I've commandeered my neighbour's verge. They've given it to me. It has a lot of sun, and it had a lot of weeds growing on it, and I threw lots of compost on there and some seedlings, and I'm growing a veggie patch. And there is a bit of a dynamic between some of the plants, which is fantastic. And I just was thinking about what I can add to this so that it sort of develops its own flavour, but also it obviously needs nutrition and you know, it still needs some support.
Wow, that's quite it's a big question. What's your context? What do you want to do with the Verge in the end? What's the long-term vision?
Well, I've been growing food on it. So leafy greens, herbs, lemongrass. And then in the very shallow parts where there's concrete underneath, I've been just trying out different flowers and, you know, herbs that maybe could grow shallow. I don't know. It's just a bit of an experiment. I'm not very scientific.
Yeah. Oh, crikey. I don't know. What could you add? Sounds like you've added. Sounds like you're going gangbusters. Any ideas, Jude?
Well, I mean,
keep experimenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. Just you'll, I guess, start finding out over time what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe focus on your soil. It sounds like you've added some compost. Did you say? Keep working on that. Soil is really the key. And there's lots of different ways that you can work on your soil. We're going to do some soil improving today, and we'll report back next week. I think yep. Yeah. I don't want to give away everything at this point in time because, but yeah, are you still there?
Yep.
Yes.
Zena's still there. Yep.
Yeah.
I just
Really.
want to
Sorry.
someone in. So I guess it's that compost thing. So if we were going to sort of kind of follow you along, what would be the one thing that we would do this week before we came back next week?
Observe.
Okay.
Observe and interact, and it sounds like you're really doing that because you've described your ecosystem really well already. But just keep an eye on it and see how it's going. Maybe have a look at your soil. Have you got mulch on it?
Yeah, I just put about a month ago. I put a ton of mulch on it before that big rain.
Great. Yeah. So just keep that up and see what happens over the next week. But if in doubt, compost and mulch can be a pretty healthy mantra to have in any garden.
Okay.
Jude's got a question.
I've got a question for Steve. What's the most exciting thing for you about a food forest?
Oh, wow. A good question. The most exciting, look, you look out there, like out here, right? 12 years ago, sorry, it was just lawn. For me, just coming here once a week and just walking through there, and what was once lawn is now, you know, trees and shrubs and ground covers and food, you know, figs and bananas and citrus and all sorts of smells and sights, and there's bugs and there's life. So for me, it's really just that creating life is just, I get a buzz out of that, definitely. You know, when you walk into a garden where there was nothing, and then suddenly there's life, like it's really, because it's just really, that's what gets me back, as well as the occasional fig. It's pretty good too. So.
Okay. So I'm going to see if I can turn this around. Did it turn around? What's it looking at now? Okay. Oh, did I blow it up? No, I didn't blow it up. Okay. I thought I might have blown it up. That's the end of this week's session. So thanks, Jude. Thanks, Steve. I'm going to hit return here, and we would love your feedback. This is the first time we've done this as a 15-minute rocket session. So we'd love to hear what you think about it. And we will keep, Daryl asked a question in the chat, you know, what are the things you need to think about when designing and planning for a food forest? Well, that's what the next 10 weeks is going to be about. We're going to be putting it together one piece at a time. And you'll learn over the next 6 weeks in particular, some of those jigsaw puzzles. And then towards the end, we'll start pulling it all together and helping you come up with the design. So that's goodbye from us for this week. We hope to see you next week.